Tenacious Time Podcast. It's Tenacious Time Podcast. Oh, grab your friends if you have any and come and have a great time with your host, Ricky Tenacious.
Hello, hi, and how are you? Welcome to the 20th episode of the Tenacious Time Podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostest, the current, longest reigning, most defending, youngest ever Big Valley Wrestling fighting champion, Ricky Tenacious. I'm so happy to be here today, as I am every day, to be able to speak to all of you, and hopefully, not all of your ears are going to be bleeding for the entire hour that we're here for this podcast. Speaking of which, let's just go ahead and get right into things, because today's guest is arguably one of the most popular wrestlers in Las Vegas. He is quite decorated in his so far not very long career, but is promising to be a very successful one. He is the 2014 Rookie of the Year in Future Stars of Wrestling. Along with that award, he is the 2014, 15, 16 Best Promo Guy of the Year. He is the 2015 and 2016 Best Wrestler of the Year. He's the 2016 Favorite Wrestler of the Year in Future Stars of Wrestling. And he is also, I believe, the longest reigning Future Stars of Wrestling World Heavyweight Champion in history thus far. He is my guest today on the 28th episode of the Tenacious Time Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, the Toll Man, Kevin Kross. Kevin, how are you?
Very good. And that was a tremendous yet accurate and long-winded introduction, and I very much appreciate it, Ricky. How are you, man?
Oh, I'm pretty good today, honestly. I've been looking forward to speaking with you this week. Really glad that you agreed to be on the podcast. Honestly, ever since I started the podcast, I've had a handful of people, mainly that are in Vegas, that are wrestlers that I've wanted on the podcast, and you've always been one of those names. So I'm definitely very glad and very excited that you said yes and that you're here, and I'm very eager to learn more about your career and speak with you today.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm glad you reached out, man. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, so let's just go ahead and get right into the questions. Today we're going to be talking mainly about you and your career and your thoughts on some things that have happened in your career so far and what you hope to do in the future of your career. So starting things off, obviously you're a professional wrestler here in Las Vegas. You've been expanding your horizons recently, wrestling all over the United States, recently in India, which is just a crazy thought. But before we talk about that, let's go back to your roots. Tell me, how did you get into professional wrestling?
Well, in terms of my roots, I guess it's fair to say I grew up in a combat sports-friendly environment with my family. I have a massive family, tons of brothers, tons of sisters, and lots of uncles, lots of aunts, massive family, and just about every single one of them, even the ladies in the family, were involved with combat sports in one way or another, whether it was amateur wrestling, boxing, kickboxing. I would say hockey, even though that doesn't come to mind as a combat sport, but the way they played it, it looked like a combat sport. So I was just always in that environment, and with that, there was a very, very great appreciation for professional wrestling. I was born in '85.
So you're still quite the young guy.
Yeah.
All right.
I came up, in the Hogan Warrior Macho Man era. So, it was just, I was pre-programmed. I was one of those Americans that was just pre-programmed to love violence and explosions and, something brothers. So, in terms of just growing up, being around combat sports and participating in it, I've always had a passion and a love for professional wrestling. And I always knew that if it was going to be something I wanted to do, which it was, that I would excel at it. But I was very shy on pulling the trigger on it because prior to getting involved with pro wrestling, I was one of those fans who listened to every shoot interview. I was trying to see as much behind the scenes as possible. I was so interested in the internal mechanics of what was going on. And for me, it didn't ruin what I was watching. I just had a greater appreciation for it. Sometimes people get turned off when they know too much. I wasn't like that at all. And I've just been fortunate to have a very good chin, a very good punch, and a very good kick, and some decent submission holds. And I was really steering towards prize fighting for a very long time as a comfort zone, and one day I just decided to go into an FSW academy, and the rest is history from there.
Awesome, man. Yeah, actually, this podcast is just not about you, but I like to try to connect with my guests and viewers as much as I can and try to relate some things. Right now, I'm only 19 years old. I've been wrestling for like 5 years now. But I always knew when I first saw professional wrestling that that's what I wanted to do. And so kind of the segue into that with what my dad kind of helped me do, he introduced me to amateur wrestling, high school wrestling. And so I did that for about 8 or 9 years to segue into professional wrestling. And honestly, you can chip on this as well or chime in on this. I mean, I honestly think that having an amateur background or having just the knowledge of the basics of wrestling and the foundation of it, or really just any mixed martial arts training going into something like professional wrestling is always very helpful, because you can stem a lot of the moves in your repertoire into professional wrestling. And it's also very helpful, especially when you bring up shooting. Having a strong background in the foundation of wrestling is always a good feather in your cap.
I agree with you, and not only that, but I think it helps reinforce what is supposed to actually be going on when you're portraying a competitive setting environment. You see a lot of people getting. I'm not being a wrestling snob, by the way, or criticizing anyone. I'm just saying.
It's all right.
It is as it is, so get ready. But you see a lot of people laying flat on their back for a lot of the matches. And, if we're trying to portray to an audience that the name of the game here is to hold the guy's shoulders down for 3 seconds, and only 3 seconds and you win, if we're all training to be wrestlers and pro wrestling in a pro wrestling setting to those rules and parameters, you would never, in a realistic setting, ever be able to sleep flat on your back. And as a matter of fact, and this is how neurotic I was when I was competing, I used to go to these grappling competitions. It would be like 16, even sometimes 60 people would show up, and it's winner goes on, and whoever can last the day out and get the most W's gets prize money, which wasn't anything to brag about, believe me. You probably get your groceries for the week with that. But when I was gearing up to compete, man, I wouldn't even sleep on my back flat. I would sleep on a shoulder, and it was a philosophy and a mentality. I mean, I know something's wrong with me. I'll be the first one to say that. But, I mean, you would just never be flat on your back. Even with collegiate and amateur wrestling, you get into the state of mind, you never, ever want to be flat on your back.
That's true.
So putting it back in your court, when you're talking about the fundamentals of amateur wrestling, Olympic, freestyle, Greco-Roman, catch, folk, whatever it is, you'll learn that very quickly, that is the absolute worst place you'll ever want to be, because when you're there, everything you've done, your dieting, your training goes out the window. And I think that philosophy should be utilized more in pro wrestling, but it's subjective.
Yeah.
And I'm not losing any sleep over it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I definitely here on the podcast, we appreciate everyone's opinion. Everyone has an opinion, and sometimes those opinions we learn from them, or it stems new thoughts in our minds. And the one you just put out there, honestly, really connected to me, especially the part about not sleeping directly on your back. You have to have that type of mentality, and it's really repetitive with all of the trainers I've had in amateur wrestling, or even some pro wrestling, especially my dad, who's a really big fan of just the basic fundamentals of wrestling. He's like, you never want to be on your back, and when it comes to that, and if you want to be the best, you got to live and breathe wrestling. And I think, not sleeping directly on your back, that's a part of living wrestling. That's just something you practice every single day.
Yeah, certainly, 100%.
Yeah. So, that was a pretty cool conversation we had about amateur wrestling, which is always fun. But let's go back into pro wrestling. Let's go back into you. From what I understand, you haven't. Can you just tell me how many years have you been in the wrestling business so far now?
In May of this year, it will be 3 years.
3 years, and you have done some pretty impressive things in those 3 years. And honestly, most wrestlers don't do a lot in 3 years. Some of them don't even get out of their home promotion after 3 years. Yeah,
I take this as seriously as I humanly possibly can. I mean, I want to make the most of this, and I value another person's time more than anything, even more than $1. If someone's willing to pay attention to you, if someone is willing to have a conversation with you like the one we're having right now, if someone is willing to teach you something, time is a fleeting thing. It's just a personal philosophy of mine. I give time to everyone I possibly can, and I value it when it's given back to me. And anything that anyone has shown me in this, I've attempted to utilize and optimize it to the best of my abilities, and it's paid off in great dividends, and I'm very grateful. I've done quite a bit, and, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, on that note, which brings me to my next question. Obviously, if anyone has seen Kevin Kross, which I mean, how can you not hear of Kevin Kross these days? You have a great physique to you. You have the look that a lot of promoters talk about. You walk in and you're pretty much a wrestler that any promoter how can I put this? You have the look to you, basically. There isn't a promoter out there that wouldn't want you on their card. You know what I'm saying? Like you just naturally have that look to you.
Sure.
Yeah. Like I said, just also this is just how I see it. And when you first started breaking in, you were, especially in FSW, you were kind of pushed into these opportunities, or more so given these opportunities to be in the ring with top tier talent, Chris Masters, I believe, Tyshawn Prince, and really kind of the spotlight was put on you in relatively the early stages of your career. So during that time, tell me, was there ever a time where you felt kind of overwhelmed by that spotlight? Were there any times where, because there really isn't anybody in the business that doesn't want to be in the spotlight. But then once you're in the spotlight, sometimes you find out that the bulb of that spotlight is a little hotter than you expected it to be. So how did you deal with, being in the spotlight that early in your career? Was it ever overwhelming? Did you ever feel a little pressured by it? Did you ever even feel that it maybe caused you to be better at pro wrestling?
I'll put it like this. I was not watching, virtually any independent wrestling growing up at all. I really did not even understand what it was. I didn't know really a whole lot about it. All I knew was ECW, WWF, which became WWE, obviously, WCW, and I knew about All Japan, New Japan, and Pancrase Hybrid. That's all I knew. And when I went into the school, I had no idea how it worked, really getting hired as a pro wrestler. I kind of came to my own assumptions, which was basically go to a school, learn exactly what it is that you have to do, and then I guess the school sends you to a tryout or an audition. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So when I was coming into things, I was already assessing what pro wrestling needed to look like out of me from a commercial standpoint, like a television standpoint. So I was already like, I need to be able to get in the ring with those guys, not the guys on the indies. And there wasn't, I don't mean to sound pretentious or anything of that nature, but I just I didn't have any knowledge about indie wrestling. I had no idea really. I knew it was around, but most of the stuff I saw were these horrendous highlights of people doing high spots and landing on the concrete. So I was like, I'm definitely not going to be doing that. But then as I started to train and learn, I really actually enjoyed the indies, and I learned to appreciate them, and I realized what the greater purpose of it was. So when I was being offered matches with certain people, I would always take them. I never, ever turned down a match. I still haven't ever turned down a match.
Yeah, how could you?
No, of course not. And these people that were ahead of me, I just knew that I was going to be able to work to their level. And the reason I had the confidence to do that was because I put time in every single day. And I think a lot of people, they hear me say that, and it's kind of, to them, it's in passing. But it's really not. Like, every single day, 7 days a week, I'm doing something for pro wrestling. And I've been like that since the first day I went in and I started training. That's not something I'm trying to fool people with. Like, it's I have put countless hours and days and months and now years into the preparation of being in the ring for X amount of time, given, whether it's 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6, 8, 10, 30, 40, an hour. Whatever it is, I am 100% prepared to get in the ring with whoever it's going to be. So, not to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but I've never been a I love it. And that's exactly where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be on that. I wanted to be in that spotlight, and I understood that there was a lot of work and dedication that was going to have to go into being in that position. It was not something you were just going to be able to show up to with your hands in your pocket and be like, okay, I'm ready. Like, this was going to have to be me having to catch up to people who had sometimes 7 to 15 to 20, even 30 years on me. And I was willing to take that on because I believe in my work ethic.
That honestly, saying that, like, that's really the kind of confidence I feel like almost every wrestler needs, especially when you're in that environment like FSW and you're given opportunities like that. And I honestly really think that being in the right mental state really contributes to that. I mean, anyone can go to the gym and they can spend time in there each and every day. But I feel like when it comes down to the bottom line, when it comes down to you 5 seconds before you go through the curtain, you have to have that confident mindset that you are going to go out there and you're going to have a badass match with one of the best wrestlers around, such as Matt Hardy, whom you've been in the ring with, Shane Douglas as of recently, Paul London, and I think that confidence really translates to your work in the ring. And I've seen your work in the ring. I think that you, obviously, with how successful you've been, I think you have that confidence. So would you agree that the mental state would definitely plays a factor in your performance in the ring?
I would say it's like 95% mental.
Wow.
You need to be committed. You need to be able to execute what you need to for those people. And for me, having the accountability and the responsibility to show up every night and connect and deliver with the audience, for me, there's never been any other option other than to go out there and succeed, because people are out there working sometimes 2, 3, 4 jobs, mothers, fathers, they're sick, they have all kinds of things going on in life. They're taking those dollars that they worked for and they're coming to see you. And that needs to be respected.
Yes.
You need to do what they need you to do for them in that allotted time. And that's kind of the way I've always perceived it. So I agree with you in that regard for sure.
Yes. All right. So delving into some of the bigger opportunities you've been giving, I've been really wanting to ask you about this, which is why we're here on the podcast. Haha. You spent, from what I understand, some time in Japan, or yes, Japan, right? Yeah. And I believe you did some training there, and you got to wrestle. So please just take us through that. Just shed some light on that and tell us about that experience.
Well, I've always really wanted to have a long-term pro wrestling career in Japan because, outside of the stuff that's been aired in American television, as I said earlier, Pancrase Hybrid, New Japan, and All Japan, I mean, there's not a week that's gone by, I think, since I was maybe 12 years old, where I haven't watched something from the 3 of those companies. I've binge-watched that stuff religiously. I love it. Even as I'm, sitting down eating something, I'll just put it on my phone, something I've watched a million times. I really thoroughly enjoy it. And to be able to be a part of something like that and contribute to that scene there it's something I want to do. And I really wanted to go. So shortly after I had a pretty healthy correspondence with WWE, I was about 7 months in, and I had just done my first tryout, I believe, my only tryout, and I was basically waiting on some feedback. I had gotten a green light. They said they were interested in bringing me down to Orlando, but things fell through. It's a very weird story.
Yeah. Things change all the time in this business.
Yeah. There's a lot of money in that story. I'm going to save it for a good DVD one day.
Yep.
But long story short, I decided to reach out to some promoters in Japan, and I just very humbly said, here's my work, here's my pictures, here's my height, weight, here's my style. I'm very interested in getting involved with the scene there, and any sort of advice or any sort of critiques or direction you can provide for me would be greatly appreciated. I'll take it 100% seriously. Whatever you guys tell me to do, I will do it. I'll get it done. If it means getting me there, I'll do it. And Anopi called me back, and he's like, you don't need to do anything. You're ready to go. Can you be here in 3 weeks? I was like, oh, my God. Okay. Yes, I can. And then we were off to the races. So that's kind of how that happened. I was out there for about a week, and the dojos and everything, it was excellent. Unfortunately, the company I was working for, I think they've had issues. I wouldn't want to say I don't know what those issues are internally, but they're not bringing in a lot of foreign talent. It was shortly after that show. They've kind of been growing their home talent, which is a good thing. I mean, you can't argue with that. That needs to be done with every company. But that was an amazing upper town experience, and I do plan on going back to Japan at some point.
Yeah, I honestly envy anyone that goes to Japan. I envy you for going to Japan. Japan is definitely on my bucket list of places I need to not only go but wrestle in. It just sounds like just talking about it sounds like one of the best and most humbling experiences you can have in the business, honestly.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was really hyper aggressive, just like I thought it was, and I like that. That doesn't bug me at all.
Yeah.
It was exactly what I needed it to be, what I wanted it to be, and it was the biggest crowd I had worked in front of at that time. It was like 40,000, maybe 50,000 people.
Jesus.
Incredible.
Wow.
I went from working in front of 1,500 people to 40,000, and it was just, it was unbelievable.
Wow. That's incredible. That must be a feeling that only one can know about when they actually experience it. So good on you, my man. So now let's delve into more so the personal life of Kevin Kross. I always like to kind of stretch out to what my guests do when they aren't in the ring or when they aren't in pro wrestling, because most pro wrestlers have lives. Like for me, I go to school. I'm involved with various productions and other things that I want to dedicate my life to. So my question to you is, when you aren't involved in pro wrestling, when you aren't in the gym, what are you doing with your life?
Absolutely nothing.
Oh.
I sleep in a coffin, and I get electroshock therapy 4 days a week, and it basically helps me not drink the blood of my opponents. I'm trying not to do that because it's against the law, and I believe in the Bill of Rights. Other than that, I am actually a full-time pro wrestler, and I actually became a full-time pro wrestler last year. No, wait a minute, 2015. 2015 of December, I took on pro wrestling full-time.
Wow. So you don't have like a part-time job or anything. So like wrestling is your only source of income right now.
Pretty much. I mean, I have lots of sponsorships and endorsements as well.
Oh yeah.
Pro wrestling, fitness and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I have a store set up on pro wrestling tees. But the majority of everything that I'm doing is completely and solely based around pro wrestling.
Wow, that's amazing. That is something that a lot of pro wrestlers strive to get, especially when you have sponsors. Sponsors, I don't think enough people realize just how helpful sponsors can be and how much money that can help generate when it comes to wrestling and our profession and stuff like that. And then of course and then there's the actual fun part where you actually get to go to wrestle and you get paid to wrestle. And then that's awesome. That's like the coolest paycheck you can get for wrestling. Yeah, man. So this one is still somewhat personal life oriented, but also still wrestling oriented, because I mean, if wrestling is your full-time job, I feel like everything kind of revolves around wrestling. Recently, you lost the FSW World Heavyweight Championship to Eli Drake through some very controversial events that I was there for. You held that belt for a long time. I believe it was like over 700 days or maybe 1,000. I mean, I announced it so many times I can't even recall how many days it was.
It was actually 3 million.
Oh, really? 3 million?
Yeah. It was. I held the title for 421 days.
Okay.
And, I was undefeated from my debut point. I believe 900 and something odd days. I should know that number.
Yeah.
I should know that. But yeah, it was close to 1,000 days. How about that? So
you recently lost it. Even tell us from a professional standpoint or even a personal standpoint, or just instances like that where you lose something that you had for so long, or something in your life kind of transpires and it kind of interferes with your mindset. What happens? How do you deal with losses like that? How do you recover from things like that? Do you just brush it off and keep going, or do you feel like you have to reassess yourself to keep going and keep being successful? How did you deal with losing that belt? How do you deal with setbacks in general when it comes to pro wrestling?
I drove down to the nearest available gas station, and I picked up some Rocky Road New York Super Fudge Chunk, Ben & Jerry's, and then I proceeded to go to sleep. And then I woke up, and I flew to North Carolina, and I beat the daylights out of Jason Kincaid and won another heavyweight title immediately after that. That's how I dealt with that.
Okay. So it's almost like a backup plan, pretty much.
I was about to hold a title from the East and a title from the West, and I just said, well, I guess the quote, what was his name, Macbeth from The Simpsons, that's the end of that chapter.
Yeah.
That was it. I was saying, well, that's that.
All right. Yeah, that's how that is. All right. Well, and then if it's not on the topic of belts, when you have like setbacks in your personal life, have you had any, like in the past 3 years, have you had any, moments where I'm actually going to save that question for a little later because it's going to tie into a question I'm going to have for you later.
Sure.
Sorry about that. But next question. You've been in the ring with a lot of stars. Matt Hardy, Shane Douglas, Paul London, Jason Kincaid. The list goes on. With all the stars you've been in the ring with, and being you're still relatively new, and you're definitely having a great time with it, and you're pursuing this full time. You definitely always have to take a step back and just take some time to smell the roses. So, who has been your favorite to be in the ring with so far?
That would be, I almost said Mascarita from Lucha Underground, but I am going to say Paul London.
Okay.
Down 100%. I could fight Paul London 7 times a day, 7 times a week for the rest of my life. If I was dead in my coffin in the process of being buried and Paul London was at my funeral and someone rang a bell, I would do an aerial out of my coffin and begin wrestling him dead. That's how much fun it was to wrestle Paul.
Yeah, that just happened recently, I believe. Yeah, I was there for that. Of course, I didn't announce that night, but I certainly watched the match. I attended his seminar earlier that day. Very fun time. He's a very awesome guy. Very one of the nicest people I've ever met in the business. Honestly, very genuine. And you guys had a really tremendous match as well. So can you maybe just kind of pinpoint exactly why you feel he's your favorite to be in the ring with?
Because Paul and I have the exact same sense of humor, and we both take pro wrestling very, very seriously. And I think we kind of both perceive life in general the same exact way. And just with those 3 types of components, our observations on the things we are around and the things we are doing, it just created the perfect chemistry. Plus, Paul and I are friends, so we don't mind hauling off on each other, which is in the benefit of everyone else in the audience. So it's just, I don't really have to even talk to Paul about anything that we're doing. It's like a couple footnotes, and we go in there and we both speak the same language. And that's some people can just do that with everyone, no matter what their level of education is in our business. They're very few and far between. I have no problem working on a file like that with people. I love it. But with Paul, there are special things that come out that will never, ever, ever come out with anyone else. And I think just the way we are as individuals and the things that we have in common, you'll get matches out of us that you'll never see anyone else ever do.
Yep.
And it's always a blast. So it's violence and comedy.
Yeah, I feel like I have the same chemistry you're talking about. I have that with Owen Travers, actually. Recently, me and him have formed a pretty good friendship, and we're both wrestlers, and we just have found this strange bond and chemistry that we can carry out into the ring. For a while, we hung out every day, and we trained together every day. And for a while, I had a ring available to me, and we wrestled a match every single day. And every single day, the matches got better and better and better. And to now, it's where I believe me and Owen can really just go into any ring, anywhere, and just put on our best 5 minutes, our best 10 minutes, and it'll go flawlessly. And to have chemistry like that with even if it's just one person in this business, that is like an awesome feeling. And it really creates that whole brotherhood that we have here in professional wrestling. And so, I can definitely relate what you mean when you say that about Paul. And just next to that, he's and Owen too. They're both just really awesome people in this business that you'll come across. So that's always a really cool thing.
Paul is a genius, man. He is like the Joker and Frankenstein and Bruce Lee and RoboCop and Gary Busey all rolled into one.
Yeah, and you cannot deny his very great singing skills. His performance of what is it? You're never too young to die. Never too young to die. That was one of the highlights of the night. That was a very tear-jerking, passionate, touching performance, and I will never forget that day in my entire life.
He's the greatest.
Yeah.
He is a singer.
He is a singer. So you mentioned you mentioned it, and now you're also doing it. You just got signed to Lucha Underground. So go and shed some light on how that's going for you and kind of where you hope to go with that point in your career. Like where you hope to go in Lucha Underground.
I would like to be the first man to wrestle on Mars. I would like to take Lucha Underground to Mars. We can all wrestle on Mars, but I am going to be the first match on the show to make sure that I am the first one who wrestles, and I'm going to wrestle myself because I want to be the first man. So if I wrestle someone else on Mars, it's technically the first two people. So I'm going to have sort of like an Al Snow versus Al Snow match, and I'm going to win.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you're gonna dream big and shoot for the stars, and that sounds like that's what you're doing, literally, because Mars are surrounded by the stars. So
I am building a space shuttle now. I will let you know when it's ready.
Okay.
Before that, I mean, if we're talking short-term goals, I believe Lucha Underground is being filmed for season 4, sometime around the end of this year. That's subject to change. I am super excited about it. This is a very, very special project that reminds me of what ECW was during the time when it had surfaced in the professional wrestling industry. It is literally the alternative to what people are watching on their Mondays and Tuesdays, and whatever day totally non-appealing wrestling is on. So it's a very special thing, and it's also actually changing the overall presentation and projection of professional wrestling as a sports entertainment industry. And being able to be a part of something like that, which is, I mean, it sounds over dramatic to some people, but if you're paying attention to the product, you will understand this is a revolutionary thing going on, because for an extended period of time, I'm just saying, I personally think, and maybe for that time it was the appropriate thing to do, but in the year 2017, it's not a wise thing to try to overwork fans or people who are not in the professional wrestling industry, because no one likes their intelligence being undermined.
Yeah.
So if you tell them that it's something more than it actually is, not only are they going to look at you and think you're a moron, they're actually going to take that opinion of you, that negative opinion that you've cultivated with them, and they're going to project it on our industry. We don't need that, because it's already ridiculous enough. We're all half-naked grown adults play fighting in our underwear, and I'm very much in touch with that. But there's more than that, obviously. This is the Coliseum Shakespearean theater arts, the bastard child of entertainment that we're participating in, and we're telling stories. We're telling the oldest stories in the world, stories of duality, good versus evil, sometimes evil versus evil, sometimes good versus good. And it's the oldest story that's always retold in every culture, and we're doing it in a theatrical platform with a lot of physicality involved. It's something very special. So with Lucha Underground, the way they're approaching things is very character heavy, and every match means something, and every person is over, rather than having these sleeper matches they throw out when they know people are going to concession stands and buying merch and stuff like that. Every person is getting something on that program, and I think that is tremendous. And I think that a show like that, and a program, and a company like that needs to exist now more than ever, because we have a lot of throwaway wrestling, and no one should be a part of that. For the amount of damage you can take, and how it can negatively affect your life if you get hurt, to look back and be like, I wasn't even really doing anything anyways, other than getting paid, that would be awful. It'd be an awful feeling.
Yeah.
But, I could go on and on and on and talk about how impressed I am and how excited I am being with this company, but all I can tell you is you guys are going to be very happy being kept in the dark about what it is I'm doing, because once you see it, you're going to rip your face off like the guy in the mirror from Poltergeist. So make sure you take a picture of your face before you watch season 4.
Yeah, and speaking of Lucha Underground, I believe it's now streaming on Netflix, right? I think it just got put on Netflix, the first 2 seasons.
I was told that by a very reliable source. Yes, it is.
All right, and that reliable source may have been me. Next question. But actually, we actually have one more question for you. But before we get to that, I have to get at least one segment in on this show with you. This podcast is being done via phone. Luckily, this is working out. It's however we can to make it work for you to be here. That's how we're doing it. Usually on the show, I have 2 or 3 segments. Such as the 60-second challenge, I have date night, I have a few others, but one in particular I just added, which I think is going to be pretty relative to you, is called Podcast Promo. And we're actually going to have you take part in that segment right now. Usually I do my podcast in person where I'll have a hat full of suggestions or full of names. And for the podcast promo, usually I have a bunch of various celebrities and wrestlers and different personalities in the hat that you would choose from randomly. You choose that name, and then you would cut a 1 to 2 minute promo on that name that you draw. It's completely improvised. Just like some things in this business at times. But because, of course, this is being done over the phone, there's no hat in front of you to be able to pick a name from. So what I'm going to do is, I have all 26 letters of the alphabet. And by those letters is a name, which you will not know about. I want you to randomly pick a letter in the alphabet, and then the one you pick will be the name that I have on this list next to me, and you will cut a promo on that person. Sound good? B? B? Okay. B. You picked the cleaner Kenny Omega from New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Very good.
Yes. So you have 1 to 2 minutes to cut this promo. I mean, I really don't care if you go over. This is a podcast. We're just here to have fun. So whenever you're ready, just let me know, and we'll get you started.
Give me the parameters one more time. So what do you want in the 2 minutes?
What do I want in the 2 minutes? Okay, you and Kenny Omega are going to be having a match at the next, let's see here. I'm not super familiar with the NGPW events. You're going to have a match with Kenny Omega in a Future Stars of Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling conjunction show in the main event for this brand new belt called the Super Explosion Belt, because every match that it's competed in is just an explosive match. So you and Kenny Omega are meeting at the FSW and New Japan Pro Wrestling conjunction show called New Horizons, and you will be competing to be crowned the first ever Super Explosion Pro Wrestling champion.
Excellent. I'm ready.
All right, and like I said, you have 1 to 2 minutes. This is on Kenny Omega, and whenever you are ready, begin, sir.
Listen, first things first, you don't tell me when to begin or when to end, because my name is Killer Kross. That's all you need to know. Moving forward, Kenny Omega was supposed to be competing against you at this New Horizon FSW show. Listen, we all know what this is about. This Super Explosion belt. Listen, I'm a nice guy. Don't listen to the rumors. Despite all the bad things you've heard about me, you just need to understand one thing. I want you to be the Super Explosion champion. You know why? Because the name of that title sounds ridiculous, and I don't want to be going around all over the place, people asking me if I'm the Super Explosion champion. It's a mouthful. It's ridiculous. I already have 36 other titles, okay? It's getting heavy. I don't even go to the gym anymore. I walk up and down my stairs with the belts, and I go back to bed. But you, my friend, I'm going to make you famous. They're going to call you Kenny the Cleaner Omega, the very first Super Explosion champion. Sounds like a complete idiot. I am going to hurt you worse than you've ever been hurt in your entire life, because I don't like you. I don't like the way you wrestle. I don't like the way you look. I don't like the Bullet Club. I don't like this company. I don't like these people, and I don't like smart marks. Every single Bullet Club t-shirt I see in that audience is a smart mark. You have perpetuated a disgusting and revolting fan base that is destroying this business. And now I'm just going to have to disintegrate your C6 vertebrae. And then we can call it even. I think that's a fair trade. Because no matter where the time is told, Mr. Kenny Omega, in the end, everybody pays the toll.
And cash the fucking check. That was fantastic. Very nice, Kevin.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice. Let me ask you: have you ever had any classes in improvisation, or because I mean, as we said in the beginning, you've gotten awards for your promo skills, and as we just saw now, you can just being given the bullet points, you can spit out a pretty good promo. So how have you over time prepared yourself or practiced, or I should say, how have you been able to master such promo skills?
Well, I've actually been very quiet most of my life, and I think it was like 2 days before I went to the FSW school, I fell out of a helicopter and I was killed, and I was resurrected by a satanic ritual. And after that ritual, I was just able to cut promos. So that's an unbelievable story. So no one will believe that, but since you know me, you know it's true. But I guess I'll just have to say it's a natural ability. It is just a natural ability.
Wow. Have you ever sought out any inspirations for promos? Like, for example, for me, I usually get some inspirations not just from the general situation of whatever storyline is going on, but sometimes I like to structure the mood of things and the themes from watching movies. I watch a lot of movies, especially like Tarantino and Rodriguez and various horror movies, and then you'll have like the main character cut this big old monologue, and I kind of look at promos like that. I kind of look at them as this monologue, as this really intriguing, long delivery of dialogue. So have you ever had any other things you kind of look at to kind of mold your promos?
I have definitely really thoroughly enjoyed the work by Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of his. His name is escaping me right now, but he was a writer and a director and an actor. He played Mr. Hand in the movie Dark City. He was also in Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was the guy who was balding with the blonde hair. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, neither can I right now. That's all right though. Just keep going.
Tom Hardy is phenomenal. Really enjoyed his stuff in Bronson. Brian Pillman has been a major catalyst in a lot of the things that I've done. Woody Harrelson from Natural Born Killers for sure. And I would have to say Christian Bale and Jack Nicholson. And actually, to be honest, this is going to sound like so much, but it's really the truth. Javier Bardem.
Oh, yeah?
An excellent actor. I really enjoyed his work in No Country for Old Men.
Definitely. Anton Chigurh, hell yeah.
Marlon Brando, who was a genius and way ahead of his time. And Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, I could go on and on, but I draw a lot of my inspirations and sort of where I learn from old school actors. Hitting you with a lot of ums right now. I apologize.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
That's really where it's coming from. I've always enjoyed pro wrestling promos. I just have never really tried to draw from pro wrestlers because I think a problem with pro wrestling is that they kind of draw from one another. So you get a lot of regurgitated stuff. And that's why a lot of my stuff comes off differently because I'm not really trying to emulate anyone. And if you do see me emulating someone, I'm deliberately doing it to pay homage.
Awesome. Before we get to our next question, because this kind of just stemmed to my head, and it just popped in my head because I've seen it in your Facebook post. You have been making some references to the character Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, which some people don't know this, but I am actually a huge fan of Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote American Psycho. I own all of his books. I can actually see American Psycho right next to me because I always have it around. So can you maybe shed some light on why you've been referencing Patrick Bateman? Has he been has the character kind of influenced you? Is American Psycho one of your favorite books? Just go ahead and stem off of that.
Sure. I was always a very big fan of all of Christian Bale's work. I was introduced to American Psycho by him. I had read the book numerous times as well. Fantastic read. I thought the story that was told in American Psycho was a very important story to be told in general. It's better that it came out within the last 15 years, 20 years, but the concept that explored and exploited the satire on the Wall Street culture,
Yes.
and the difference in genders, and that elitist upper class conundrum where they were all striving to go in this one particular direction, but there was really nothing in it.
Yeah.
And this guy is slowly unraveling and going crazy. It feels like he's kind of on a hamster wheel. It's kind of going nowhere. And he starts to, he kind of starts to become self-induced in his own psychosis.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great premises for a character. I thought the book was hilarious. So was the film.
Yes.
Although it's serious as it is hilarious. Because there's a lot you can learn from it about people in that time period. And it was a very real time period that happened. And a lot of people get caught up with his performance because he just stole the screen. But that type of person that he was portraying is a very common person. And I thought that it would be fun to take certain things from his performance and put them into my character. And to be honest, I've just had inside jokes probably since I was 15 or 16 years old about that film and that book with all my friends and family. So it started off as an inside joke, and now enough people know about the film where, they think I'm just kind of, it's just out there. It is what it is.
Yes, I personally, because I'm a huge fan of not just that. I'm more of a fan of the book than I am the movie personally. I mean, I think Christian Bale is cool and everything. I think the book captures the idea of that psychotic character a lot more, and because it is typically a much longer book than most books, and so it kind of allows for more time to develop that character and his psychotic sense and everything like that. Honestly, it's a pretty good read, everybody. You should definitely go out and purchase American Psycho. It's definitely a very graphic book, very pornographic book, very violent, but definitely in the end, a very good read. Just to stem off how much of a fan I actually am of this book, on my door in my house to my room, on the front of the door before you walk out of my room, there's actually a sign I've put there that says, "This is not an exit." And I'm pretty sure you could appreciate that, Kevin. Yes. So moving on, we are now at the time of the last question for you on this podcast. We've been going on here about 50 minutes now. Been a very enjoyable time. This is a question I ask all the guests that come on my podcast. And recently, it's been kind of a little bit misunderstood and a little misinterpreted by my guests, but that's fine. Everything's subjective on here. The question is, I call it the golden question. The question is, in your 3 years that you have been in the professional wrestling business, what has been a really good day on the job, and what has been a really bad day on the job? So, in other words, what has been your favorite day to go to work, and what has been the worst day that you've been to work?
I'm not ever looking. I'm never looking for this to happen, but when people in the audience are emotionally moved from the match that I've had to the point where they've been crying in hysterics, people being angry to the point of throwing their garbage, people coming up to me before and afterwards telling me how much I've done for them, and I've never even met them. People tell me, my performances and the videos and promos I've released on my YouTube channel have saved their life because they were in a very dark place and they were drawing inspiration from seeing the things I was doing and saying and the literature I was providing. And that is the best day that I can have in this business. And I'm very fortunate to say I get those a lot. A bad day is if I get hurt or the guy I'm in the ring with gets hurt. That's a bad day. I've never, ever, I hate to say this, I don't want to kill the business or kill my gimmick, but I've never, ever, really severely hurt someone to the point where they weren't going to get up and do something the next day.
Yeah.
But, I've been injured numerous times doing this, and, we wind up working hurt. But, I don't know, I would say the last couple injuries have been a little more than just being hurt. I mean, I've been injured, so that's always a bad day, but that comes with the territory, and, you rehab it and you get back in the ring, and, since January, I've probably felt the best I've ever felt in my entire life. You had mentioned earlier in the podcast about training and looking the way, a promoter would want you to look. I've come to realize that a lot of people think that based on the way you look is going to get you your bookings and stuff like that. I can tell you, just showing up yesterday, so to speak, and getting to the places that I've been, a smart promoter will not care how you look. A smart promoter will not even care how you wrestle. A smart promoter will look for the guy who draws tickets.
That's
and
true.
however he's going to choose to do that, is going to be the way, because I've seen a lot of guys that look absolutely tremendous, and unfortunately there's just no connection with the audience. It all comes down to the relationship that you have with the audience. And, all I can say is, I just do the absolute best that I can, and I make sure that every single person goes home remembering something that I did that night. So that's kind of my good day and my bad day.
All right, fantastic answer. I couldn't have said it better myself, because I can't really, because I'm not you and you're the one answering the question. But so yeah, you are a guy who commits countless hours and time and days and your body in general and your passion to this business of professional wrestling. You strive to be the best you can, and some people look at you as the best around right now, and you've moved people in emotional ways, and other people that have been in the ring with you, some in physical ways. And that's Tenacious. Well, that is all the time we have. That's all the questions I have for you. Kevin, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me today, come on the podcast, and spread some light about your career. It's been a great time getting to know more about you and your career, and I can honestly say I see nothing but good things in your future.
Thank you very much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good day, okay?
You too.
All right, bye. All right, everybody, that was the show. Thank you very much for watching. This has been the 20th episode of the Tenacious Time podcast. Join me next week for the 21st episode. Look on my social media accounts for who the guest will be. You never know who it could be. It could be somebody big. It could be somebody small. Whoever it is, we're going to learn about them. See you then. Bye.